Greetings and welcome to the Saco School Board meeting for Wednesday, November 30th, 2022. Call this meeting to order at 5 p.m. Let the record reflect that all the school board members are present. And with that, I'd like to invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. Up next is the approval of the school board meeting minutes dated November 9th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Mayor,
School Board Member Truman,
I move we approve the school board meeting minutes dated November 9th, 2022.
Second.
motion's been made by School Board Member Truman, second by School Board Member Preble. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. School Board Member Archie?
Yes.
School Board Member Preble?
Yes.
School Board Member Richard?
Yes.
School Board Member LaFortune?
Abstain since I was not present at the meeting.
School Board Member Gale?
Yes.
School Board Member Truman?
Yes.
School Board Member Johnston?
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 with one abstention. That brings us to item 4. There are no adjustments to the agenda this evening. Brings us on to item 5. There are no correspondence in the packet for this evening. That brings us to item 6, which is public comment or public session. If there's a member of the public who would like to address the school board, please come forward and be heard. With nobody seeking recognition, moving on from the public comment section to section 7, the superintendent's report. Superintendent Ray.
Good evening, everybody. Have a couple of items to talk about tonight, and just to recap a couple of things that we just discussed in the Finance Committee meeting is that we have the ability to purchase a minibus that will help us provide flexibility, and that we're hoping that we will be able to lock that in the next week or so as we look at all of the homeless and other needs that we have for transportation. As we've examined our current budget reports, we'll be able to start looking at the next round of improvements at Saco Middle School for furniture and for painting, specifically around kind of that next level of furniture for the library and for rooms, whether that be bookcases, shelves, those types of things, and to begin the process of bidding out the next round of painting that can occur. Additionally, Principal Susi and Sue Morrell have started to look at new cafeteria kind of tables and layout there, as that's a space that we're looking to improve, and we're able to use some of the fund from Hot Lunch to support the furniture in that space. Really hoping that we can make that space much improved. Painted numbers now is kind of taking the next step of how we can create a unique eating space for our students that maybe not be the traditional cafeteria set up 100%. So those things are on the table next, and from budget. Our budget process has begun. Staff has turned their budgets into principals. Principals are now working on finalizing those budgets that will then come our way right before the holidays. One of the things I think that we always have a watchful eye on is, just like we do in our households, schools will experience some of the other larger increases around utilities, fuel, supply costs. Where inflation has hit us at home, those still hit us at school. So that will be something that we will need to prepare for in our budget process. I'm still waiting to hear from the Department of Education of how we can apply for the, there's some additional funding that was going to be made available for municipalities and school departments that saw the large increase in ELL homeless. We're told there will be $500,000 that we'll be able to apply for somehow, but we don't know what that how looks like yet. Hoping to get that information in the next couple of weeks. On a couple of student sides of things, this weekend, the Twin City Theater Group which is run through our rec department, that has a lot of our middle school kiddos, has their production of Elf on the 2nd and 3rd. So if you want to go see a good student performance, you can head out to that. Just a reminder to parents that, you know, while today we're lucky that it's a lot of rain, pretty soon that will be white stuff. And that to make sure that have all of our information in Power School so that we can send out those alerts in the morning time. Just again, those usually start with Facebook posts being the very first thing that we can do, because that's quick and easy to put out. It takes a little bit more time to go through the phone system pieces. Also, for those of you that are between the communities, when we use those systems, they're two very different systems that we have in place in both communities, which some is a little bit more responsive than others. So it's not that anyone is slower or quicker, it's just systems are different, and we need to think about bringing those into line. We are piloting the bus routing software now that we've made some changes to hopefully be set for the school year. So I expect that after the holidays we'll be able to roll that out in a more robust fashion. But monitoring those buses and being able to see that route of where the bus is very easy on your cell phone. And then a couple of weeks ago, many of our communities around the state had some very tough days based off false reports of school intrusions. And while certainly that was a tough day for everybody, it did give us more of a real-life opportunity to look at the procedures that we have in place, whether that be from communication to lockdowns and school safeties. And while very proud of the group of individuals that we worked with here about how we shared communication and did things, clearly it is an opportunity for us to reflect and to improve upon things the next time. And we'll be coming together as a group to really talk about those things and talk about what needs to be put into place, what can happen, what can't happen. And additionally, Meg and I have been kind of researching some software that might improve that process. I think one of the things that became very difficult that day is managing the spread of misinformation and how schools react to that piece, because very quickly there was, whether that be misinformation or just people reacting to the information that they had heard, that becomes a very challenging thing for school departments to wade through. And it does take us time to make sure that we have correct information, the right information, and our focus first and foremost is on the students and making sure that they're safe and accounted for in those. So we'll be doing a lot of reflection on school safety and how we just, again, continue to improve each and every time and find places where we need to get better. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions for the superintendent? School board member Gale.
It's just a quick question following up on that. Is the Saco Police Department going to be a part of those discussions? And overall, was there any additional collaboration or areas that you think need to be strengthened with that?
No, certainly as we looked at software, we've already been in contact. I've been already in contact with Chief Clements about that. I would have to say that our work and communication that we had that day with the Saco Police Department and any of the agencies was outstanding. Jack and I were able to be on the phone probably, we talked 4 or 5 times in the first 15 minutes of that piece. But I think that since that, Jack and I have also talked about what maybe some of the things that we would do different when there's a situation of, pretty quickly both of us learned the challenges of a vibrating phone that just wouldn't stop, and how we communicate with each other. And again, nothing but kudos for Jack and his team of the response of having law enforcement at our schools, even though we weren't in danger. I think it brings a sense to help us bring some of that just order I think the other piece that was great is that York County superintendents were able to spend some time with Mr. Nelson in Sanford to talk about some of the lessons that he learned that day and some of the things that went well or not as well that you just wouldn't expect. But you know, Jack and I have been in contact, and his contact that day was outstanding with us.
Any further questions? School Board Member Truman.
Have you priced out how much it would be to update our system for closures?
Yeah, so we use a product called Aptigee that we're looking at. And what Aptigee does is it hits all of those social media networks at one time. So it's a very different process when I'm canceling school for Biddeford and Dayton than here, where using the Aptigee product that we use there, whatever I type in, I record my voice from the computer. I translate it into how many languages are in there, Chris? 20 plus languages, all in a click of a button, and it's out the door. And it hits all of those spaces at that one time, which is, you know, when you think about all that happens in the morning time to cancel school, whereas Meg is you get Meg's voice in Saco that comes in, and Meg and I are talking to each other, making the decision and starting the process from the same starting point. And that process takes significantly longer. And that was like one of the pieces that when we talked about sending out information, the speed of the system impacted how people got things, even though they were all going at the same time.
I remember that from last year. So
Yep.
is this something that'd be pretty, is it within our budget to do
I
an
think it-
upgrade with that? And is it a pretty seamless, I use that word loosely,
Yes.
to move everything over into that system from Saco into what you guys already have?
So it has to communicate with, it's a process.
Yeah.
And it's not a process that happens quickly and something that would need to be worked on over the summertime.
Sure.
We also have a little bit of the added challenge that our 9 through 12 students are in a different platform, so how we pull that in. So we got some work to do
Okay.
as we look through the next, you will see a line in the next budget cycle to address some of those needs.
One more winter for Meg.
Any further questions? Moving on to item 8, Chair's Report. Chair LaFortune.
Hi there, I have just a couple of things tonight. One is an email came earlier from Terry Gorman about a joint meeting request for the 19th of this coming month. So that would be December 19th, so Monday at 6:30 here. You all would have gotten the email, but just in case you hadn't seen it, I'm going to bring that up. The other thing is that on the 14th, our next regular meeting, that's our administrative meeting that we have annually to nominate board officers and cover that stuff. So as we had discussed last year, I definitely would be open and would encourage the passing of the baton, so to speak, to give someone else the opportunity to grow as a board member and chair the board, as well as vice chair would be open at that point. So just think about that for our next meeting and plan to come with nominations. Thank you.
Thank you. That moves us on to item 9, staff reports. There are no staff reports.
I had one question in regards to the chair's report. For the next meeting, are we just picking the board chair and co-chair? And then do we do the subcommittee assignments the following meeting? How does that,
So
I forget
typically,
how that works?
Yeah, so typically the way that works is with a change in board officers, that would probably most logically happen the meeting after that.
Okay, that's fine.
We've done a and I've done it in the past where we try to do all of that at the same time, and it's not smooth, let's put it that way. So it's probably better to do it the following go-around, rather than, put someone who, may be fresh to the role in the, on the spot to pick those things right out of the gate, so.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions? There are no staff reports. Moving on to item 10, board subcommittee meeting minutes. The policy and personnel committee meeting minutes. Next meeting is 12/14 at 5:30, so December 14th, before the school board meeting. Finance and Infrastructure Committee, their next meeting was earlier this afternoon at 4 p.m., and there was a little bit of a report out in the superintendent's report of what Finance Committee talked about. And then the Curriculum Committee has no meeting scheduled at this time. Brings us to item 11, old business. There is no old business on the agenda, so that brings us to item 12, new business. Item A is a new hire memorandum in your packet that originally had no action, but has been since updated and requires action of the board. Is there anything to report further from your memorandum, Superintendent Ray?
Actually, I think it's the resignations
So
that had the update.
resignations has the update.
Thank you. Any update on the new hires? Any questions on the new hires from the board? Brings us to resignations. Any update, Superintendent Ray, on the resignations other than what's been provided?
Just that we're adding that one name.
Okay. Questions from the board?
No questions, but I do have the motion if we're
School Board
entertaining
Member
motions.
LaFortune?
I move we accept the resignation of Carrie Leone, CK Burns teacher, effective January 7th, 2023.
Second.
Motion's been made by School Board Member LaFortune, second by School Board Member Preble. Any discussion? On accepting the resignation, no discussion, roll call vote. School Board Member Archie?
Yes.
School Board Member Preble?
Yes.
School Board Member Richard?
Yes.
School Board Member LaFortune?
Yes.
School Board Member Gale?
Yes.
School Board Member Truman?
Yes.
School Board Member Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item C of new business, and that is a curriculum update from Assistant Superintendent Parkhurst.
Thank you. So you'll see in your backup a brief review of the work that our curriculum design teams have and will be focusing on this year. So I'll just spare you reading the memo and try to run through some of those highlights. For English language arts, we have word study pilots underway in our K-5 classrooms. In kindergarten and second grade, as a reminder, we were looking at 2 different programs and working with those pilot teachers to identify the strengths and weaknesses and align the one that will best meet our students' needs for selection in next school year. Our 3rd through 5th grade classrooms elected to have all teachers piloting the same program and are working with key teachers in those classrooms to kind of act as leads to pilot that with fidelity so that we can ensure a really smooth, full rollout for next school year. And we're also looking at revising and aligning the language arts portion of the elementary report card this year to ensure that it's in alignment with whatever word study resources we select, and to just do a review of the standards that are there and ensure that they're reflective of what we expect from students at each grade level and in alignment with the main learning results. For math, we have new programming fully underway in K-8 classrooms with Eureka Math Squared occurring for K-5, an upgrade of our prior resource of Eureka Math, and then Reveal Mathematics, which is published by McGraw-Hill for our 6th through 8 teachers. So that's quite a big change. Our focus there is really looking at supporting that implementation this year. Additionally, revising the report card standards at the elementary level to be sure that they align with those new resources and our expectations. And then at the middle school level, ensuring that we have both a clear placement process for advanced mathematics courses at the middle school level, as well as transparency for families and students about how that placement takes place so that we have options for students to participate in those accelerated programs when they are ready, and also have some fluidity so that if students, don't make the cutoff scores, they do have an option to continue to work towards those advanced classes in future years, rather than a more traditional model of kind of getting stuck if you don't make the cutoff in the initial year. For science, we are continuing to frame our ongoing work with the ecology school, and also in conjunction with that, looking at field trips K through 8 to be sure that our field trips align with particularly science and social studies curriculum, and looking at consistency so that all first graders have at least a consistent experience, and then building towards that consistency over a number of years. One of the things that we're pretty excited about in our ecology school and field trip discussions is looking at a model where we would pair 6th graders with first graders for a field trip, then 7th grade with 2nd grade, 8th grade with 3rd grade, which would keep those students working together potentially over the course of 3 years to kind of develop some of those mentoring relationships with younger students. Our social studies team is continuing to work on articulating common resources. We have a really strong group of teachers that have been kind of creating units over time, and then through COVID, the focus was primarily on math and literacy, and so we're really looking to ensure that we have common resources and clear expectations for teachers about what social studies content and units will look like. So we look forward to kind of having something to bring to the school board in that subject area by the close of this school year. And that's all I have.
Any questions for Assistant Superintendent Parkhurst on the curriculum update? School Board Member Gale.
Just a quick question on the social studies. Will those updates go through the new curriculum committee and then be coming up?
Yep, so the curriculum design team is kind of the internal teacher and administrator group, and then what the recommendations of that team are and updates from that team will then be provided to the curriculum committee, subcommittee of the school board.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That brings us to item D, the October financial statements. It is in your packet. There's a link to the October financials in your packet. Superintendent Ray, will we be hearing from you, or will we be hearing from Finance Director DiDonato?
You'll, just for me, and again, this is just more informational of what we discussed in Finance Committee of knowing where we stand currently. In the next month, you'll start to see the encumbrances of all staff in the November, so that we can look at where some of those available balances are for the end of the year, but this is informational in nature.
Any questions on the October financials? No questions. Moving on to item E, the pre-audit financials. Superintendent Ray?
Yes, Jason, as he was getting prepared for the audit that occurs every year, I just wanted to kind of give a highlight to where we were at the end of last year. And there is more detailed information in the Finance Committee budget on this. But we closed the year with $1.964 million in a positive balance. A lot of that was planned based off the fact that we received additional school subsidy at the end of the school year. It allowed us to pay off, fully pay off the $995,000 that we were in the deficit with the city, so that that account is back to zero. We used $275,000 as carryover in the budget for this year as a increased revenue. And so as we ended the year with a positive balance, still remaining of $693,000. That will be part of our discussions during the upcoming budget year to see how we start the year, knowing that we do have to fill $275,000 of the hole, but as we can look at that other money to anticipate any one-time expenses that may or may not hit our budget. We know we have a lot of capital that we have to focus on. And then I think it's also important just to remember, like I said before, in all of our homes, we see utilities costs increases, and I suspect we will have great conversation as a city and school department about the same things that we are seeing here. So we may strategically want to look at, is this a one-time piece? How can we invest to lower some costs, et cetera?
Thank you. Any questions for Superintendent Ray? Moving on to item F, the CSTAG Training Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines, and we will hear from Assistant Superintendent Parkhurst.
Do you see how quick that came up on the screen? So just want to give everyone an overview of some training that we are working on with a tri-district partnership around comprehensive school threat assessment guidelines. Just a little background about what that is, who we have participating, why we're doing it, and some of our next steps. So essentially, it is a training that is being supported by the Maine School Safety Center, but it is a national evidence-based program. It is not just adopted or created in Maine, though they are kind of financially supporting the training at the state level. And it's a problem-solving approach, which is intended to prevent violence in order to assess and intervene with students who have threatened violence in some way. It's not only recommended by the U.S. Department of Education, but Secret Service and the FBI. And what it does is trains a multidisciplinary team in every school to be able to identify behaviors of concern, assess the actual level of risk, and then provide appropriate interventions. So there are 2 levels of training that we are currently in the level 1 training section of. It's a 6-hour training, though some of us have found it takes quite a bit longer than that to complete, depending on how far you dig into some of the related resources. That's an online self-paced training that all individuals participating will have about a month and a half to complete. And the level 2 training is a 4-hour training that is online, but it's completed with interdisciplinary teams attending together on their sites. Generally, our threat assessment teams in each school include administrators, school counselors, social workers, nurses, resiliency coordinators, and/or the school resource officers. So we have a combination of different stakeholders involved in that process. And as I shared before, it's being provided free by the Maine School Safety Center. Last year, we did have some administration trained across 3 districts and multiple other pockets of staff. What we did not have was a cohesive system to ensure that we had a team at every single school that could be called upon to come into action in these situations. I'm excited to report that across all districts, we'll have 92 staff members trained by the end of this calendar year, 44 in Biddeford, 6 in Dayton, 35 in Saco, and then 7 across the central office team. So a little bit more information about what it is and what the evidence-based outcomes are. Those that are in a violent pathway, though it may seem that it just kind of happened out of the blue, the research indicates that that's not generally the truth, that there are warning signs that are present. We just need to be aware of what those are, so that we can intervene and not only help stop that behavior, but get to the root of the problem and help the student down a better pathway so that those threats do not repeat. A behavioral threat assessment is a fact-based, non-punitive method of identification. So it's really intended to intervene with the behavior, to problem solve, to ensure that that behavior does not occur again, and that the root cause is addressed. That collaborative, multidisciplinary team is really important so that it's not just one person making a decision, but a team of people that are trained using tools to kind of identify ways in which they might intervene. There are documented decreases in use of suspension. Counseling is often used more when students receive a threat assessment. Students and staff both report a more positive school climate in schools where this is implemented, and students report less bullying and more willingness to seek help from adults. So those are all really key factors that we feel are critical for our schools that we believe this training will help us achieve, as has been proven in other areas. So by the end of December, we will have our school teams completed with level 1 and level 2 training. There's an online platform that the state is offering for free to districts that we will get information about this spring that allows access to some of those tools and checklists that syncs with our student information system, but keeps it separate so that those threat assessments don't necessarily become punitive records unless it's deemed by the threat assessment team that they should, but we still have an ongoing record of those. And then we will continue to review procedures that we have in buildings to be sure that they align with the learning that we acquire through CSTAG so that we're kind of cohesive across the board. Looking at the data as we begin to conduct behavioral threat assessments with teams to identify trends or patterns that we would be able to mitigate or head off a little bit earlier. And then, of course, look at our school practices and preventative measures in response to that data to be sure that we're continually making growth for our students. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the board? School Board Member Gill.
So just to confirm, so by December 2022, every school will have a group, a CSTAG group?
Yep, so we began that level 1 training just, I think, a week into November and have until December 13th, which is the date of the level 2 training, to complete that online portion, so yes.
And then how is it, I guess the group comes together to determine whether or not it's a punitive intervention, or like, I guess, how is that determined? Because it seems like it would be a pretty fine line between.
So the threat assessment is actually separate from the decision for something to be punitive or non-punitive. The purpose of the behavioral threat assessment is purely a safety decision and what interventions should take place to ensure that this threat is not carried out and or that this student has the supports that they need to not take the next steps with the threat that they've made, or they understand the severity of it. It's a purely problem-solving approach, and it's intended to be separate from what the punitive piece is. So yes, you might have, like, the administrator that's participating could be part of both of those teams, but it's really about separating what the punishment is and how can we solve the problem and ensure that students are safe and that the student who may be making a threat gets the help that they need rather than just getting a punishment, which isn't to say that there's never a punishment warranted.
So then for every threat, then is the idea then that there would be a separate threat assessment on the other end of that too, so that there's the punitive side if the case, but then also this kind of more supportive, holistic approach of looking at it?
Yes. Yeah, and part of the threat assessment can certainly inform what level of punishment may be appropriate, but they are separate.
Any other questions? School Board Member Johnston?
Excuse me. So I'm trying to sort of, I think, like Will, trying to put together how this process will work. So if I am a teacher, for instance, and it comes to my attention that there's some, what might be perceived as a threat, however it might be, I would then bring that forward to, who would be the next step?
So from a teacher standpoint, it would follow the same kind of procedures. They would let an administrator know or refer it to a guidance counselor or the office. All of those folks would kind of know now that it would eventually get filtered down to somebody who's on that team.
Right.
And depending on the severity of it, it doesn't, based on the training, and I don't want to get too far into it, it's not like we're convening a team to have a 3-hour meeting anytime there's a referral that sounds like it may be a threat. But every team member that has been trained then has some checklist items, clear questions, and understanding of how to make a determination about the level of severity. Sometimes that means the team is going to come back and have a really big conversation based on the information that they gather, and sometimes just because a member of the team has been trained and they've gone down through a couple lines of questioning and understood the situation better, they can act, as a single actor without convening the whole team. So from a teacher's perspective, the referral would still look the same, but it's the people responding to that referral that now have a cohesive response and a team to work with when needed to respond to that referral.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board? No questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 13 on the agenda, which is other information. There's no other information noted at this time, unless anybody has anything. That brings us to item 14. There's no executive session this evening. So that brings us to item 15. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
School Board Member Truman, second by School Board Member Preble. Any discussion? Roll call vote to adjourn. School Board Member Archie?
Yes.
School Board Member Preble?
Yes.
School Board Member Richard?
Yes.
School Board Member LaFortune?
Yes.
School Board Member Gale?
Yes.
School Board Member Truman?
Yes.
School Board Member Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 5:37 PM. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.